Welcome to Retire Happy, the show designed exclusively for the backbone of our nation, federal employees. Join your well-sought financial advisor, Mamadou Bojang, and his dynamic team as each week we delve into the stories, insights, and tips about your federal benefits and retirement. Buckle up as we embark on a journey to demystify your benefits and retirement so you can make smart and confident choices and retire happily ever after.
Welcome back to Tariffs and Your Nest Egg, Navigating Retirement in a Shifting Economy. I'm Alex, your host, and with me is our financial expert, Mamadou Bojang. In our last episode, we discussed the basics of tariffs and their economic impact. Today, we'll focus on how tariffs affect individual investors, especially those planning for retirement.
Yeah, Alex, it's a very important topic, right? If we think about tariffs, right, it's happening, but as an individual investor, you have to think about it and say, okay, what does that mean to you? And then what does that mean for your retirement? And then this is happening at a time, as you know, we deal with a lot of federal government employees to help them to demystify their retirement benefits, because these are very complex, and we know what's happening in the federal employee world right now, where people are losing their job. So that alone is very, very worrisome, and then it's very frightening. We also know that the one thing that probably the market doesn't like, Alex, is uncertainty. Right?
Quite right.
Yeah, the market doesn't like uncertainty, and then my God, if anything, these tariffs will bring uncertainty, and they've actually done that. The market is just trying to kind of like wrap around what does this mean, right? It's a lot of things going on. So we've seen, in 2 days, the market is down almost like 10 points.
Yeah.
That's a big swing. So in times like this, though, this is a perfect time for people to look at and reassess their portfolios and then be able to say, well, how are you allocating your portfolio? Well, are you mostly in risk investments? If you are in what I call your distinguished age, meaning that you're closer to retirement,
Right.
Don't get me wrong over here. I mean, nowadays 70 years old, people are still in what I call the go-go stage, right? They're still very vibrant, very young, and they're good to go. But I use maybe like 70 as an example, whereby you're gonna be needing money from that portfolio and you're still very risky, then that's a problem. That could potentially be a problem. Yeah. So because we don't know when the market is going to go down. And the problem with that is, well, if you're heavily exposed to the market, especially now, and whereas you are taking money out of your portfolio, in our industry, there's something called a sequence of return risk. What does that mean? Well, if you're taking money out of your portfolio, at the same time when the market is down, then you're putting too much pressure on your portfolio. So the ripple effect is you could deplete your assets very, very quickly. So the order of when you take that money out is very, very, very important. But you see, this is what sound planning comes into play. Because now, if all of a sudden you have your portfolio and that's what you depend on to get income. Let's say, for example, you have like a major health issue, and you have to take that money out. Well, if you have to take that money out yesterday, well, that's a problem, especially if that amount is significant. If you have to take out $100,000, and that's a big dip from your portfolio. So that's why planning comes into play. That way you avoid days like that, and that's why what I call you've heard me say this before. When clients come in and we're having this conversation with them, we talk about planning, but we also talk about how can you reposition your assets to make sure that you put a purpose for that money. Whether that purpose would be more like to get income, whether that purpose is going to be like more like to for an astute investment management, whether that purpose would be more like from a tax planning point of view, whether that would be more like from a healthcare protection point of view, or maybe for like your legacy, how to pass on to assets to your beneficiaries. So all those are things that you have to think about and then be able to reposition your portfolio. Now, some financial advisors are very savvy in doing this. Obviously, they have to look at their portfolios and see what adjustments do we need to make, in a portfolio, and in how we're going to do that and when to do that. But if you're doing this only by yourself, well, the problem is sometimes you don't have you probably don't have the training for doing it. You probably don't have the temperament. You probably don't even have the resources to do that. Right? And sometimes you lack the guidance on how to go about it. So if you want to do this by yourself, then that's when mistakes happen all the time. And we've seen this all the time. Alex, and I think, when we talk to staff, I always say this. I said, if I hear somebody comes in and a client said to me, guess what? Then that's not good. Because that means they've already done the damage, right? Right?
Probably.
Probably,
if they
right?
Say, guess
yeah,
what?
Guess what?
That probably
right?
means some damage.
Yeah,
has been
exactly.
Done.
So I'd rather for them to come to us and then say, "Hey, Mamadou, this is what we are thinking," and that way we can think through it, test it with against your plan, to make sure that that's something, whatever your wishes are, whatever you want to do, to make sure that it's in line with your plan. Rather than doing something and come back and say, guess what?
Yeah.
And I think what happened is if somebody is a do-it-yourself investor, it's always guess what? They probably do that, and the next thing that becomes a problem. Right? Yeah. So one of the things that though is we do a lot of tax planning in the office, but we've seen people, one of the things that everybody talks about is like a Roth conversion, right? Everybody thinks that, what that means is like take money from your traditional to put it into the Roth and all that. Well, there's a lot of things that are involved in that, and we've seen people come in and creating like a lot of tax issues for themselves, right? Because they think that they can do it themselves is very, very easy, right? But as we know, as finance advisors, right? Well, even with us, we have the tools, the training, and then we also have the resources to be able to look at all of those to see what is the optimal way of actually helping you to achieve your goal, right? Because there's a way of doing it, but we always look for the optimal way. So that's why it's important that in times like this for people to sit back and then maybe perhaps meet with your finance advisor or your accountant, or whoever you have. If you don't have a finance advisor, reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you with that. But I think making sure that you sit down, put whatever your goals are, let's put a plan in place and then be able to work accordingly. I think that would help most people to enjoy the retirement that they rightfully so deserve. Yeah.
Really good feedback, Mamadou.
Yep.
Can you provide a case study of an individual investor who adjusted their portfolio in response to these tariffs?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we cannot disclose names, right? But we've seen our portfolio whereby there are certain clients that will come in, and then we'll make some strategies out there for them, right? Not going into details in terms of what we need to do, but an example would be, well, if you happen to be heavily invested in a stock or in an area like automobile industry, well, that's you got to reassess that. I'm not saying you should get away from that, right? But you got to reassess that to say, okay, well, number one, what was the goal? Is what's happening now, is that going to affect that goal? Because we know that if you're in that industry, it's probably going to see a negative return on that. So is this a time for you to kind of readjust and then look for a brighter spot somewhere in the economy? And we constantly do that. And we call rebalance the portfolio, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to rebalance the portfolio every single time. So, and you hear me say this, right? What sometimes in the eyes of a customer might seem like, oh my God, everything is coming down, right? Everything is like crash and burning, right? Well, no. Well, from a financial advisor's point of view, in our eyes, it might just be the normal course of the market.
Yeah.
And I like to give analogies, right? So sometimes you might not feel well. Maybe while you're sleeping, you feel like, maybe a little bit pain somewhere in your body, right? In your mind, you're wondering, okay, what's going on? Is this something kind of like bad or not? But you go to a doctor looks at it and say, you're fine, right? You're fine, right? So think of it that way. Yeah. So we are not medical doctors, but I often tell people we are financial doctors. So we want to be able to look at it and see whatever you're reacting to. Is it the end of the world, right? Okay, what is it going to do? What is that going to do to your plan? Right? Sometimes it might not actually make a dent in your plan, but sometimes it may. Well, if it's going to make a dent to your plan, then we have to pivot. We're going to pivot and then be able to put you in the right direction, right? So yeah, and that's why I always encourage people to, go get yourself a financial advisor. Go see one. If you come and see us, right? I think it's very, very important because, I happen to believe that having a financial plan is a very, very, very critical thing. Because Alex, I don't know about you, though, but so my wife and I, we work in the same office, right? So we are partners in life, but also in business, right? And every day, so we're together 24/7. But every day we come to work, guess the first thing that she will do? She will put in the GPS. Because even though in my sleep, I know how to drive to go to my office, right? I know I've been doing it every day. But she will put in a GPS. Because that's how structured my wife is. Because she wants to know, is there going to be traffic? And I'll give you an example. And this might sound like I'm kind of like going off topic of it, but it's very relevant to what I'm trying to say. So one day, we have to take 2 cars because she has to basically go in and take our son to soccer practice. I know I have to stay in the office like a little bit later. So I left the house before her, but knowing me, I didn't put on a GPS. And I'm like, okay, fine. It didn't even dawn me. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to drive. And so enough, right? I get to the office, guess whose car was parked there? She was parked there. And then I came into the office, I was like, how? Because the reason being, I was stuck in traffic. I was like, how did you get here? And then the first thing that she was like, yeah, you didn't put on a GPS, right? And I was like, nope, that's why. So I'm saying this because a financial plan is your GPS to your retirement, which is your destination. It's not perfect, but at least it will give you some insight in terms of, hey, is there going to be a traffic jam? Like what's happening now? And you have to say, okay, well, is that going to deviate from your retirement? So that's what the GPS will kind of like, a financial plan will do for you. Like it's your GPS to your destination, which is your retirement, right? So I like to use analogies. Alex, I think you know me. I like to use analogies that way people can relate, can understand. Yeah. What's the whole point of like financial plan? Because
it's great feedback. Yep. Well, we've covered a lot today. Let's address some common questions from our listeners about tariffs and their impact on the individual investor.
Yeah, and like I said before in the last episode, I think most of the time what people are worried about is, well, especially people that have earmarked to buy a car in their retirement plan. Some people come to us, like say, for example, one of our clients, we're just going to name it as John Doe, right? Okay. Well, John Doe is going to retire this year. And then we put a plan that, he wants to buy a new car. That's the dream, the retirement to it, But he's worried now, like with the cars, right? What is that going to do for him? He's like, well, Mamadou, we put in a plan that we're gonna buy a car. Should I hold on to that? And then we looked at the plan. I said, well, no. I said, let's look at the plan. So what we have done is we went back and looked at the plan. I said, what do you want to buy? What kind of car do you want? Because I really want John Doe to actually, I want them to enjoy that retirement. They worked hard for it. So, Alex, you know me. I'm one of those financial advisors that I always tell people, you know what? Life is too short. We got to enjoy while you can. We don't have a crystal ball. If you want to delay everything until when you retire, when you later on, well, we don't know what the health condition is going to be, right? So I always encourage clients to say, you know what? Make sure go ahead and while you're working, let's save responsibly and also spend responsibly, right? So what we have done is I went back and looked at the plan. I had them come to the office. We looked at the plan and say, well, what kind of car do you want? And then I say, but make sure you come with a kind of like a price point, what you want. We looked at the plan. And guess what? They can still do it. And I say, go ahead and do it. You're fine. Go ahead and get your dream car. Enjoy the retirement. Now, I'm saying that because if John Doe was not working with us, do you think John Doe is going to buy that car? No.
Right.
Because he's going to be worried. He's going to be worried, okay, am I going to be able to afford it? Do I have to wait? Right? Maybe you might wait 1 or 2 years. Well, you can now. We want to. So that's the beauty about what we do or how we make impact in clients' life. Yeah. So and I could give you many stories about that, right? But these are examples. Like this is one example that we've actually met with clients and then be able to change their retirement outlook. And I don't care. People can look. You can look at it and say, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is we let him do what he wants to do when he retires. He worked hard. I mean, they worked hard, right? I mean, to want to make sure that they can enjoy, right? So, but I feel good that anytime you can go to a client and say, hey, John and Mary, you know what? Hey, nice job. You go ahead, enjoy. You can do this. Go ahead and do it, right?
Well, that's
I you know what I do, Alex? I always tell them, you know what? Make sure when you get that car, drive by the office because I want to be able to see them. I want to be able to congratulate them on that because they've done very, very well. One of the things that we found out, Alex, I think you know this. People sometimes don't give credit to what they've accomplished, and you hear me saying this all the time. I tell clients, we got to be able to celebrate what I call the micro wins. It's not easy to build retirement to a certain point. So along the way, you got to be able to celebrate it. And that's the mantra that I have in the office, and I make sure that clients do that. So to me, getting that car is something that we have to celebrate, and that's why I tell them, hey, swing by the office because I want to see that. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, outstanding.
Well, that is great advice, great feedback. And any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, let's say this is a very difficult time, and I get it. But this too shall pass. So make sure that please do not make emotional decisions on this. Focus on your long-term plan. Have a retirement plan in place. And if you can, come and see us. If you don't have a plan, we'll be able to help you to set up a plan that you can have confidence in, and so that you can retire happily ever after because you deserve it. You deserve it. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mamadou, for sharing those insights. If there's any other questions or topics that our listeners have, please feel free to reach out and share those with us. And until next time, happy investing.
Until next time, stay informed, stay financially savvy, and keep shining as the backbone of our great nation. This has been Retire Happy, your benefits and your future. We've got you covered. Axiom Value Wealth Management LLC is a registered investment advisor. This platform is solely for informational purposes. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Likes, endorse, and approve are not intended to be endorsements of our firm, our advisors, or our services. Please be aware that while we monitor comments left on this page, we do not endorse or necessarily share the same opinions expressed by site users. While we appreciate your comments and feedback, please be aware that any form of testimony from current or past clients about their experience with our firm is strictly forbidden under current current securities laws. Please honor our request to limit your post to industry-related educational information and comments. Third-party rankings and recognitions are no guarantee of future investment success and do not ensure that a client or prospective client will experience a higher level of performance or results. These ratings should not be construed as an endorsement of the advisor by any client, nor are they representative of any one client's evaluation.